The classroom smelled like whiteboard markers and burnt coffee. Mia sat in the back, clutching a notebook she'd bought from the dollar store, its cover bent at the corner from being stuffed into her worn bag. Her pen hovered over the first line as the instructor, mid-40s, kind face, practical haircut, wrote Introduction to Human Anatomy on the board in thick blue strokes. Around her, most of the students were younger. Not teenagers, but young enough that their lives still had scaffolding. Support systems. Parents who sent them lunch money or texted them reminders to study hard, sweetie. Mia felt like she had walked into a movie halfway through. She didn't speak. She didn't want to explain why she was 30 and just now starting over. That night, she studied on the bus home, her eyes darting over diagrams of cells and tissue. When she got off, it was raining. Her socks were soaked by the time she reached her door. She made a dinner of instant noodles and boiled eggs, then fell asleep at her desk halfway through a chapter on the skeletal system. Her neck ached when she woke, but she didn't complain. No one was listening anyway. Days bled into each other. Work, class, study, work again. She missed meals. She missed sleep. But she didn't miss the holidays. She didn't miss the calls that never came. At the diner, customers barely looked at her. But one evening, after the dinner rush, a man sat at the counter and ordered pie and black coffee. He had soft eyes and a tired smile. Somewhere in his 40s. Wore a mechanic's uniform, name stitched across the chest, Lucas. He was a regular, but they'd never spoken much beyond, "What'll it be tonight?" That day, he asked, "You look like someone who reads." Mia blinked, surprised. "I used to." He gestured toward the book poking out of her bag. "Still counts." She smiled, faintly. "It's just anatomy. Homework." "That's reading," he said. He came back 2 nights later. And again after that. Always after closing hours, when the place was quiet and Mia's feet were blistered from walking. He never stayed long. But he always tipped well. Always left his mug perfectly centered on the saucer. One night, he left behind a paperback on the counter. The Secret Life of Bees. Inside was a note in messy handwriting, "In case you want to read something that isn't about bones." She didn't know why, but it made her cry. Not loudly. Just a silent stream down her face as she sat on her futon that night, the book pressed to her chest like something fragile. They didn't flirt. They didn't exchange numbers. But something about his presence made her feel, not alone. Not completely. Her grades weren't perfect. But they were hers. She passed her first quiz. Then another. Her instructor once called her answer thoughtful. No one had called her thoughtful in years. She didn't tell her mother. The group chat had gone quiet again after New Year's. She hadn't sent anything since last Christmas, and no one noticed. When her niece had a birthday party, Mia didn't get an invite. Just saw the photos online, balloons, cake, matching t-shirts. She clicked out of the album without finishing it. Instead, she wrote flashcards. At night, she started rereading that old novel Lucas gave her. She underlined phrases. Wrote small comments in the margins. It reminded her of who she used to be. Who she still could be, maybe. One night, she saw him again. "You finished the book?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "I did. Like it. I remembered what it feels like to care about people who don't exist," she said. He smiled at that. That's the best kind of caring. When he left, he gave her a look, not romantic, not intense. Just real. The kind that says I see you, without needing to say it. And somehow, that mattered. She walked home in the cold, coat pulled tight, book pressed to her side like a talisman. Tomorrow was another test. Next month, another class. She had rent due. She had dishes to wash. She had miles to go. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel stuck. Just moving. Maybe that was enough. The diner was short-staffed again, and Mia picked up the extra hours without thinking. It wasn't a heroic act. It was habit. She moved through her shifts like muscle memory, taking orders, refilling coffees, pretending not to hear the rude comments when customers snapped fingers or left crumbs across the booths like it was someone else's job to care. She studied during her breaks, pages curling at the edges from grease stains and coffee spills. Her highlighters had started drying out. She kept using them anyway, sometimes just dragging the tip across a sentence for the illusion of brightness. Lucas still came by. Not every day, not on a schedule. But enough that she began to recognize the sound of his truck pulling up outside. He never stayed long. Just a slice of pie, small conversation, a note scribbled in the margins of a new book. One night, she asked what he did for fun. He thought about it. I fix things. That's not fun, exactly, but it's what I do. She nodded, then surprised herself by saying, I used to write. That made him pause. Why'd you stop? I started surviving, she said. He didn't respond right away. Just nodded slowly, like that answer made sense in a way most people never admitted. That night, he left behind a small notebook and a pen. No note. No comment. Just the items sitting neatly on the counter like a dare. Mia stared at them for a long time after he left. She didn't write anything that night. But she put the notebook under her pillow. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, her body finally caught up with her schedule. It started with a pounding headache during lecture, then a wave of nausea so sudden she had to leave halfway through class. She staggered into the restroom, locked herself in the stall, and slid down to the tile floor, breathing through the dizziness. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. She couldn't even remember what breakfast had been. Her hands trembled as she checked her phone, 3 missed calls from the diner, a text from her landlord, and a calendar reminder that said, "Call bank, overdraft pending." She closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She wanted to. But she was too tired. When she got home, she collapsed on the futon, boots still on, coat unzipped, and slept for 14 hours straight. The next morning, she woke up to sunlight and a knocking at her door. Not pounding. Just a polite, steady knock. She opened it cautiously. And there, standing on the threshold, holding a paper bag of groceries and wearing a hesitant smile, was her sister. Jessica. Hair perfect. Jacket stylish. Her eyes scanned Mia from head to toe, pale face, wrinkled uniform, hair tangled from sleep. I was in the area, Jessica said, as if that explained everything. Mom said you weren't answering messages. I'm busy, Mia replied. Jessica looked like she might say something sharp. Instead, she stepped inside without being asked, placed the bag on the counter. Apples. Bread. A rotisserie chicken. Mia stared at it like it was a trap. Jessica exhaled. You missed Chloe's recital. She asked about you. She has your number. You could have let her call. Jessica's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It never is with our family, is it? They stood in the silence of Mia's apartment. A train passed in the distance. Someone upstairs flushed a toilet. Finally, Jessica said, softer, I didn't know about the nursing classes. Chloe told me you're studying. Mia didn't answer. Jessica's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? That I'm finally doing something for myself? That I'm trying to be more than what you all left behind. Jessica looked down. I didn't mean to leave you behind. You just did. The words hung heavy between them. After a moment, Jessica turned to go. At the door, she hesitated. Chloe still has your cookies in the freezer. She saves them. Says they taste better because you made them. Mia felt something twist in her chest. When the door closed, she sat down at the table. The groceries were still warm. She pulled out the bread, broke off a piece, and ate slowly. Later that night, she opened the notebook Lucas had given her and began to write, not essays, not study notes. Just pieces of herself. Half sentences. Childhood memories. The time her dad taught her how to tie her shoes. The time she got lost in the grocery store and cried until a kind woman found her. She wrote until her hand cramped. And still, there was more. The first major exam came on a rainy Monday. The kind of gray that soaked into bone, that made every step feel like dragging yourself through water. Mia arrived early, her notes tucked into a binder held together with tape, her heart thudding somewhere near her throat. She hadn't slept the night before. She'd reread every chapter twice, drank too much coffee, and whispered vocabulary words aloud like prayers. She sat at the back of the lecture hall, pencil trembling in her grip as the instructor passed out the test. It wasn't easy. Halfway through, her vision blurred, and she had to close her eyes to steady herself. But she finished it. Every last question. She walked out of the building in a daze, her soaked sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor. The cold hit her cheeks like a slap, and for once, she smiled at it. She'd done it. Maybe not perfectly. But she had shown up. She hadn't run. At the diner that night, Lucas came in late, as usual. He noticed the exhaustion in her eyes and didn't ask. He just passed her another small book, The Alchemist, worn at the edges. Something to read when you're not memorizing muscle groups, he said. She didn't speak much. Just nodded and wrote, I finished the exam on the corner of a napkin, sliding it across to him. He smiled without looking up. You'll pass. It wasn't a question. The next morning, her phone rang just after sunrise. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. When she finally answered, it was her brother's voice, tense, clipped. Mom's in the hospital. Heart arrhythmia. They're keeping her overnight. Mia didn't move. She stared at the wall, her coffee cooling in her hands. She's asking for you, he added. Those words didn't land softly. They hit like guilt dropped from a rooftop. But they didn't pull her into action either. Why now? She asked. Her brother didn't have an answer. She hung up. She sat still for a long time. Then, without thinking, she pulled on her coat and walked the 6 blocks to the library. She didn't go to the hospital. She didn't call back. She spent the morning tucked into a corner between the reference section and the radiators, rereading notes for the next unit. Her hands shook when she wrote, but she kept writing. Later that evening, she opened the notebook again and filled 2 pages with questions. If someone only calls when they're afraid, is that love? If they only see your value when you're useful, is that family? She didn't know the answers. That night, Lucas didn't show. The booth he always sat in stayed empty, and somehow, that felt louder than any silence she'd ever known. She stared at it between refills, her mind drifting. Near closing time, a young woman came in crying, holding a baby wrapped in a thin blanket. No wallet. No phone. Just a look of sheer desperation. Mia didn't ask questions. She brought her a hot meal, then found the number of the women's shelter on the corkboard in the back room and handed it over gently. After the woman left, the manager scolded her for giving out food for free. Mia just said, "Fire me," then, and kept wiping the counter. He didn't. When she finally got home, there was a voicemail from the hospital. Her mother had been discharged. "She's fine now. She just wanted to see you." Mia deleted it. Then she opened her notebook and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't have to mean going back." A week later, her exam results came in. B+. She stared at the paper so long her vision swam again. She walked home that night with her shoes untied, rain soaking her through. But her heart felt strangely steady. Inside her apartment, she turned on every light. Made real food, eggs and rice and a few slices of avocado. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. She ate while reading the new book. On page 27, she paused, pulled out the notebook, and wrote, "Maybe surviving isn't the end of the story. Maybe it's the first chapter." Outside, the wind howled. But inside, Mia didn't flinch. She was learning how to stay. Even if no one noticed.